The UK, we're told today, according to new research, is heading into a communication crisis, with nearly half of people now shying away from talking about their long-term care needs because they don't want to be a burden to their families. Well, let's talk about this with John Sargent. He's the author, veteran political journalist, and of course, star of Strictly. And he's joining us to talk about this. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, Julie. How are you?
Very well indeed. Lovely to chat with you. Now, we talk about social care and care costs, and the government's talking about the changing how they help fund care and how much money we're going to have to spend if we are in need of going into a care home. We talk about it in the public realm all the time, but this research is suggesting that actually people don't like to talk about it within their own families.
No, it's understandable, really. But what this survey from St James Place shows is that nearly half the people questioned thought it was too stressful to talk to friends and family about this. Well, now, this is all very well, but when it comes to it, whichever stage you're at, whether you're young or whether you're older, if you don't know anything about this, if you don't know how expensive social care can be, which is £1,000 a week, you're probably lucky. It could be more than £1,000 a week. Yeah. Well, that's big money. So the only way to think about this is to think about it early if you can. And of course, you've got to know, if you're a child and you think, oh, well, when my parents die, I'll get their house, it'll all be wonderful. You've got to know that you might not, because the parents may have to sell their house in order to pay.
Yes, don't plan your finances on that, but also having honest conversations about what people's plans are for their elderly years. Are parents, for instance, assuming that they're going to come and live with you? I've made sure my parents know that's not going to happen. Are they assuming you're going to be able to financially help? And lots of people might think that their parents are quite well off or not well off. They think they haven't got money when actually they've been putting money away just for such an occasion. People need to have these conversations, because at the end of the day, families are going to have to deal with this.
Exactly. And although most people think the state should pay, about 3/4 of the people in the survey said that they expected to have to pay. Now, that means, as you say, that families and members of the families have just got to know about these things so they don't live in a dream world. And if you can start off early, well, then the savings can build up. They're horrendous if you've got to pay for it straight away, but it is like knowing about mortgages, like knowing about pensions, boring subjects, grim subjects. But if you don't tackle them early, you pay for it in the end.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that actually leads me into another topic I want to ask you about. Now, I had the great pleasure of working in the same office as you. Goodness knows, far too many years ago than many of us would ever like to remember. I was on the Evening Standard. You were on ITV. You were political editor. You've been the BBC. But you've been everywhere. You're a veteran journalist, and you of course, star of Strictly as well, with lots of people got to know you from. But you've been watching politicians. An awful lot of the politicians that we've got, on air. We see in Parliament, and we see on our TV screens all the time. A lot of these people have known them, frankly, since they were in short trousers, a lot of them. What do you make of these latest battles over, what's called Tory sleaze and Owen Paterson, and breaking of Westminster lobbying rules and standards and the like? Looking at this now from further away, what do you think's going on?
It's just appalling. I mean, they had one Conservative MP was in difficulty, accused of sleaze. They're now all accused of sleaze. I mean, that takes quite a bit of doing, doesn't it? To get yourself into a mess, you get yourself into a further mess. I'm reminded of, my old friend years ago, Dennis Healy, saying, if you're in a hole, stop digging. Well, they've now just dug themselves into an even bigger hole, because Owen Paterson has got to go through all this again. He's got to explain how he thinks he's justified in what he did. What if he loses? So you get weeks and weeks of this, and I think he personally may think, well, thank you to all my friends for grouping round me in this way. But in fact, he may suffer because of the publicity if he loses the final case. So this could just be a sort of awful sticking plaster, which hasn't solved the problem and which has just brought Parliament into disrepute at a time when, because of the pandemic, they've been sidelined anyway. So the first big thing that they're on, the first time they're back on the national stage, it's for the worst possible reasons.
Well, indeed, and we all go back to the 2009 expenses scandal, which dominated the news for months on end. It saw numerous MPs being forced to resign, not to stand again, and numerous kicked out by voters. A lot of people will be in Parliament maybe thinking, people aren't paying attention to this. They're busy with other things. They don't know who Owen Paterson is. They won't care. But voters have a funny habit of deciding themselves what they care about.
They do. And of course, at a time when it's stressful for other people, particularly financially stressful, you just think, oh, well, thank you. So it's a subject that people feel they understand. They think, right, here's someone who's accused of taking money he shouldn't have taken. Well, that's quite an easy accusation to understand. I'm not saying it's necessarily true, but you think, oh, yeah, right. And now they're changing the system. And that looks bad, doesn't it? It looks as if under the present system, he would have been found guilty. Under the new system, which Labour may not even take part in, and the other parties may not take part in, you're left with such a shambles. How do you resolve it? Well, it's very difficult to see how at the end of all this, Owen Paterson comes out clean as a whistle, Parliament comes out of it clean as a whistle. They're heading towards, it seems to me, a worse non-resolution of this dreadful problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. John Sargent, always good to hear from you. Absolute pleasure. Former BBC and ITN political editor. He's, of course, an author and pretty good on the dance floor as well, depending. Anyway, well...